It's my privilege to introduce the speaker for this session, Michael Stephenson. Mike is a freelance cloud specialist and architect with a strong background of years working in enterprise integration environment. He has been a Microsoft MVP for 10 years. He is also heavily involved in community activities, speaking, blogging, acting as a host and an organizer for Integration Monday. He has worked in a number of industries, including finance, higher education, and SME, among the others. Hope you have all seen this unicorn here. Please drop in your cards if you are not already done, and a charity donation, please. It will be given to you given away today afternoon through a raffle. Pike also owns an online store, Nothing But Unicorns, dedicated to people who love unicorns. You will get to know more about the shop during the presentation. Let's hear from Mike on the session about changing the game with serverless solutions. Over to you, Mike. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for inviting me again here, Saravana. It's always great to speak at Integrate, and thank you guys for taking the time to listen to me talk again. I've had some heckling already from the guys in the front about whether we're going to have Minecraft this year. So just to confirm, no Minecraft this year. I know that's going to disappoint people, but I can't do it every year because my tech support's not available anymore for it, and also I've got to up my game. I need to do something different every year. So this year there's a little bit of a change to how we're going to do the session. So I'm doing two sessions, one now, one a bit later on. So now I'm going to talk about serverless, and I've been talking about this for a little while now, and people find it really interesting. So I thought it would be a good session for people here, just really to inspire people of like ideas you can take away. That's really the aim of this session. The second session I'm going to talk about serverless 360. And in particular the BAM module, but the reason we've swapped them around is I wanted to reference this session in the second session, so there'll be a little bit of continuation, and hopefully that kind of all fits together. So you guys have already been introduced to me. One thing I just want to shout out about is, so there's a little thing I run online called the Integration Playbook. So Integration Playbook, so what I did, I started this idea a few years ago with the idea of sharing ideas to talk about which technology do I use when, what do the technologies do, and how do I compare them, make decisions, which technology should I bet on and which shouldn't I. So I kind of started this a few years ago, never really got far with it until Saravana brought out Document 360, which just made it a bit easier for me to write this kind of book. I think a lot of people find it really interesting to help you, particularly with cloud and integration architecture, and it's a community resource if people want to write stuff for it. Check it out and let me know, and I'm happy to put other people's articles in there. But it's just an ongoing resource I've got as a bit of a pet project that I think it'll be very valuable to the community. So if we jump back to our slides. So yesterday, it was Monday, John Fancy said this quote. It's at the sort of keynote. So he's got all this new technology, really fancy stuff. The challenge is, what are you going to integrate, automate, modernize, disrupt, etc. And he set a challenge to us. So my response to that was, hold my beer and let me see what we can do. So as the introduction said, some of you may not have known, but I also have an online unicorn shop called Nothing But Unicorns. At one point in time, it was the biggest online retail shop selling nothing but unicorns in the world, measured by me in terms of how many products I had on the website, not in terms of how much revenue I made, unfortunately. But I've cleaned it out a bit, so I'm probably not the biggest now. But it's a nice little shop, makes a little bit of pocket money. But what it does do is it's something I can use to do demos with on the cloud. So I've actually made more money by doing fancy demos and winning IT work off it than I have off selling unicorns. But putting that to one side. So the background of the shop was, it originally started, wasn't an IT thing. I was just talking to some kids about the idea that in the modern day, I can set a business up and I can trade with anyone in the world, and it's not really very difficult to do. And I was just trying to inspire the kids to have a bit of entrepreneurship and kind of that kind of thing. And I thought, after a while, well, I've been saying for a while at conferences that I think the way cloud technology's changed is changing the game so that smaller companies who I've never been able to work with in the past are starting to become companies that I can work with because of the way engagement would change around cloud usage. And I kind of thought, well, look, let's test out my theory. I've been saying this for a couple of years, but it hasn't really happened yet. Let's try it out with my own idea. So really what I've got now is I've got my own Contoso and Fabricam. That's a real business. And I can do what I like with it because I'm the boss, and and I've got a bit of cloud to use. So really what I've done is I've just developed a bunch of demos that fit real world scenarios, and they're just scaled down, But the beauty of it is they're actually very similar and use the same technology that enterprise customers use to solve the same problems. And as it happens, I work with some companies, like one of them is one of the biggest healthcare insurance companies in the world. And we're doing projects using exactly the same technology, very similar patterns, and it just scales up and down dependent. And I think that's a really important message for IT today. So how it started was I started using Shopify as a platform. And I was really starting to begin with just the idea of the commerce bit. And I had some performance problems in my shop where it was running a bit shitty. And I tried to troubleshoot these problems, and I thought, well, actually, I know I can use App Insights. I wonder if I can somehow inject it into my shop. Suddenly I got all this telemetry about the client-side experience, and I could sort out what the problem was and fix it. And it was one of these like add-on widgets that you can add, so I got rid of it. And I thought, well, actually, if I can do App Insights here, I wonder what else I can do. So I set myself a bit of a challenge, and the idea was what I want to do is kind of create some fun demos that solve real business problems that people would be able to relate to. I want to make the story compelling and related to the real world. I want to make the store kind of pay for the demos. But to keep me honest in the story of being a small business, I have to be like a small business. So I'm trying to use as little code as possible. I'm not going to be using Visual Studio. I'm going to be using serverless SaaS applications, PaaS applications, or PaaS platforms, consumption cost model. I'm trying to keep this so it would be feasible that a small business could actually implement these kind of solutions. And where I started off from was the Shopify platform plus my ecosystem looked a bit like this. So I've got Shopify, I've got some order management stuff, I've got suppliers in the background. For payments and stuff, I'm using Stripe and PayPal. And the real secret to a shop really is the social media and marketing side of it. Personally, I find that a bit of a black art, so that's really probably what holds me back a little bit. But I'm not really going to be talking about that today. I'm going to really try and focus more on the supply chain scenarios and customer experience scenarios. But as I got into the shop, it was very quick that I found there was some challenges. So things like your website, I'm putting this website out there for customers, and it was very static and boring, and I want to make it come alive and do some interesting things. I want, data's king these days, so I wanted to be able to grab some of this data that the products that I'm using have and try and make my own decisions and make the data visible like you would want in a normal organization. Some of the apps I've got are black boxes, so it's quite difficult to get into them. But actually, that's the real world, and it was good that in some of the cases, some of the integration scenarios aren't just point a connector to it and it magically does it, because we know that that's the nice ones, the easy ones. But what about when you've got something that's a bit more difficult and you're back to batch files and that kind of thing? So I've got some scenarios like that in there. My favorite bit's shipping. So the shipping and delivery bit is the biggest challenge probably in the business, where I take an order off a customer, I pass it to a partner, it gets shipped and it goes to a carrier company who, they're big companies, they don't really care about me that much, but my customer experience is very dependent on that order getting there fairly promptly. And if it goes wrong, it's out of my control to a degree, but the customer really gets the impact on it and may tell me what they think. So we'll talk about that a little bit. Now, to begin with, we need to know a little bit more about Shopify. So I'll show Shopify in a minute, but as a platform, Shopify's for e-commerce. It has these kind of modules on it. You've got your online store, it gives you a website, you've got products. What's really cool about it is the two APIs and the webhooks. So what I was able to do is when I found out it had notifications, I can start getting it to send me data when events happen in the system, which really opens up a lot of opportunity. And I'll just show an example of how I started using that. So using Shopify webhooks, what I was able to do was spin up API management. So we've got the consumption tier of API management. So I pay per click. Big game changer for the small business, because API management's too expensive for a lot of companies, and you're either using the really low level SKUs, which are still quite pricey, or if you want something really serious, it's going to cost you a lot of money. But consumption model means that anybody can use it now, which is a good thing. And what I was able to do was just put some functions behind API management. Little bit of code here, so I said no code or little code. There's about 3 or 4 lines of code in each function. And all I did was I got the events and I put them onto Service Bus. I created one topic per event, published them on the topic, and then I just left it at that. And that doesn't deliver a lot of business value at this stage, but what it does do is it opens up the opportunity for me to do things later on. So when I get an idea, I might come along and go, oh, I know I've got that already on Service Bus, I can just go and do something with it. So let's just have a quick look at how that kind of hangs together. So up here we've got my shop. I'll have a look at this bit. So if I go down, this is obviously the back end of the shop. If I go down to the settings area, and you can see in the notification bit, I've got all sorts of notifications, and we get down the bottom, we've got these webhooks. And what's quite cool is I can pick what event do you want, and you can see, this starts, you start seeing a list like this, and it's Candyland really. It's what event do you want to do something with. Can pick a JSON format or an XML format and just give it a URL, and it's going to post it to me. So if you notice they're all my API management URLs. So if I go into Azure next, so we jump up the top, and you can see I'll come back to the resource groups in a minute, but you can see in here I've got one called Shopify webhooks, and I just spin up some functions. We'll let them come up. It'll take a second because there's a few of them. And, the beauty of functions, because we've got bindings in functions, I can configure it so it's got an HTTP receive, and I've just configured the destination to be Service Bus. And you can see here, if we open this one up, you'll see it's only about 2 or 3 lines of code to actually configure read the message coming in, set it to the variable. It's a couple of lines of code, and it gets it onto Service Bus. And then the beauty of that is, once we're on Service Bus, what do I want to do with it? So as a kind of strategy, I decided that I was going to do 2 things. So first off, I was going to create a SQL Azure database, and I was going to put some messages in there, and I'm going to start to use that as my BI platform. So if I want to do some reporting, investigation of data, I'll start routing things up into SQL, and I can build Power BI and stuff like that. Likewise, I'm going to need some back office processes at some point, so I might decide that I need an order management or something to deal with customer queries. Shopify doesn't really do that. It just does the kind of e-commercey bit. So I decided to use a model-driven Power App, which actually was inspired from last year when Kent was on the Flow team and stuff. We spent a lot of time talking about Power Apps, and that conversation really sort of led into me ending up using Power Apps for some of this. And I can basically knock up a Power App to do whatever I want quite quickly and just integrate into it through Logic Apps. So the value here is that, it meant I've got this online store, I'm hooking stuff, just to reiterate, hooking stuff onto Service Bus, and then I can kind of come up with ideas of what to do with it. And from there, that led on to a whole bunch of ideas where, I even had one idea, I think I'll talk about later, where I actually had it on Monday morning and knocked up a new demo because I came up with this really good idea while I was walking in. So the first one we're going to talk about when we start getting into the real business value here is something called most popular products. So on my web page, if we have a quick look at the front. So for anyone who hasn't seen it already, this is my online store, and it genuinely has unicorns. Sam Van Out actually bought a unicorn yesterday, which I think was one of these ones here, which I'm assuming is going to be a mascot for the Codit office or something like that. But where we are here is we're in this most popular products section. Now, what I could do is I could just pick the products that or make me the most money, put them all in there and say, they're dead popular, go and buy them. But what I wanted to do was look at the data of what people put into a shopping cart. So shopping carts, for anyone who's not familiar with e-commerce, shopping carts are like really the key to being successful. If you can convert shopping cart ads into sales, that's where you're really successful. But the data of somebody adding something to a shopping cart, I can get events for that, and I think the industry averages something like 70% of things getting added to shopping carts never turn into a sale. But I can see what people are interested in from that action. And what I did was I captured all these events of people putting stuff in the shopping cart, saved it in my SQL database. Then every night I've got a logic app, so we'll show you kind of what that does. And my logic app basically ticks through. So, I've got my webhooks going through up here, saving to the SQL database. My logic app kicks off on a recurring trigger, cleans the collection of products called most popular products, goes to the SQL database, does a query for the top 20 products based on the last couple of days, and then it goes and updates that collection. So basically every night that list refreshes based on data customers are driving. Now, what's really interesting when you think about that as a quite high value business case, but how do you implement it? So when I go into my sort of setup over here, so I've got a resource group called most popular products, and maybe just taking a step back for a minute, you notice some of the resource groups are called platform-something, and some of them are called app-something. So the idea there was platform ones are things that have got reusable assets in, so like a service bus instance, cognitive services, something like that. App-something is really like this composite app model that Saravana introduced the other day for Serverless 360. So that would be kind of an app in a box. Not always fully the case, but that's kind of where I'm trying to go with that. Now, what I've got with most popular products, as you'll be able to see here, it kicks off, I've got some variables, and then I go and call the Shopify API. Now, one of the things that I would say is quite good on this use case is the fact that Shopify's API is really rich, really easy to use, and quite powerful. That makes my life a lot easier, but it makes it able to do a lot of good demos with it. So here I'm just getting the products where I'm doing kind of a get, parse the data coming back. I do a loop through, and I can do a delete command, do a query of the SQL database, do a loop through, and do an add command. Now, this demo, I actually knocked this up while watching the match in the second half. So it was about 45 minutes to do this demo. And that's, if you think, that's a kind of ready-made, solves a business problem demo in under an hour. If you translate that into the business world, obviously there's a bit more to it than that. But what I'm seeing in my enterprise customers is using serverless tech, the amount of time to deliver value has gone down considerably because we're taking away the technical challenges, using technology that lets us focus on solving the business problem. And I think that's the key, regardless of the size of the customer you're working with. So I think I've talked about the value on this one already, so we'll skip over. So the next one's the shipping data. So this one's quite complex. This one's at the same time one of my favourite ones. So I mentioned that the challenge with shipping is I give the package to a carrier. I no longer have anything to do with it till it gets to the customer, but they may, I was telling the guys actually in the room yesterday, one of the biggest problems I had was the Canadian Post strike just before Christmas. So Canada just decided to stop doing any mail for about 3 weeks just before Christmas, and it was just chaos. And I've never thought that Canadian post offices might cause me grief, but when you're a fledgling e-commerce king, that's the new problems you deal with. So what I needed to do then is I've got in my web app, in my website, I've got this thing called track order, so I can add plugins to it. So I've got this thing called aftership, and that lets me add a thing to be able to track the order. So there's a special page when you get an order, you get a tracking code. You can put it in one of our web pages, and it'll tell you where your parcel is. And all this data comes into Shopify through this thing called aftership, and you've got all the different carriers that plugged into it. So that's really cool because I'm not actually doing anything at this point but add an add-in, and I'm getting things from UPS, Royal Mail, everybody. And that's really, really good for the customer side of it. But what I decided was every now and again, you get an order that takes a bit longer and you'll get a customer query. And I kind of thought, well, I wonder if I can predict which customers are likely to have an order that's going to be a bit longer to get there and then email me asking where the order is. And if I can reverse that and email them and say, I know you're wondering where your order is, but this is what's happened with it. And I thought that would be a great customer experience to offer up. So what I did was Aftership also has webhooks, which is quite handy. Some of these new techs make your life easy. So I spun up a Logic app. Aftership pings me all these updates about shipping, and I drop them onto Service Bus. That's the first thing. Put it on Service Bus, opens up the opportunity to do something later. And one of the first things I did was put it into SQL Server, and then I could do some reports on it. Let me get this one up. And then one of the next things I did was from SQL Server, I'm also putting it into Power Apps when I work out what's an at-risk order. So I'll just kind of show you guys how I work through this. So over, let me just see if I can get this up. Over here I've got my model-driven Power Apps. So for anyone who's not familiar, model-driven Power Apps and Dynamics 365 are kind of very much the same thing nowadays. So really, if you're in that ecosystem, comfortable with Dynamics, you'll transition to Power Apps quite easily. But a Power App gives me a really easy way to build quite a powerful back-end Office app to just solve our problem. So here I've got data from orders where, let's say this one here, and I've made a point of making sure for demo purposes you can't really see any data that people would be bothered about, so it's really just IDs and stuff. But what happened is this order came in a few weeks back or a few months back. It was destined for the US. It flagged up in my SQL query as being a one that I should start keeping an eye on. So what I usually do is go, I think the rules are something like, if I haven't had a tracking update for a couple of days, if you've gone past a certain number of days, I'll start keeping an eye on you because you'll go into the Power App and I've got things like the tracking number at the top here, the order number, the position of where it is, and then I can keep an eye on it and I can either close it with a positive outcome or a negative outcome. And what usually happens is, like 9 times out of 10, it'll just get delivered and I'll see the delivery come through and I'll go, oh, it's already been delivered, it's fine. But every now and again, there's one to troubleshoot and you can kind of take it a bit further. And you get little things like, sometimes they're just held at the post office if someone's on holiday or something like that. Sometimes sometimes they do genuinely get lost in the post as well. And if that happens, you can just send a replacement and do an insurance query and stuff. But the idea is the Power App gives me a way of having a back office application to manage the customer, and then from the developer experience. So if I can remember which one it is. So here's my daily refresh of Aftership stuff. So as well, you can see that one's been failing actually. So there's my serverless 360 use case I need. So one of the things that was quite interesting actually, just as a bit of a tangent, was I built all these demos, and until I started plugging serverless 360, and I didn't realize how many of them failed all the time for little bugs and that were getting them, and then it started, because you don't always go in here, you know what I mean? And then you start realizing that actually you've got some crappy demos, so I'll have to fix that one. But the idea is, I've got Logic app pushing this through. One of the quite interesting things as well is I'm using Teams quite a lot. So as well as pushing it into the Power App and the database, I've got this little team channel here called Delivery and Shipping. So the idea is I'm trying to mimic what the back office team in the business, if it might, pretend it's a bigger business than just me, they might have a team who look after deliveries. So here I'm writing notifications as they come in, saying, this order, what's the status of it, and that kind of thing. I've got some pages at the top, so I can help. That's my page for tracking, but I've also got like USPS's page just to make it easy for people to get to it if they're going to troubleshoot. And what's quite interesting as well is the Power BI data, because I'm using Teams, I can actually inject some Power BI reports in here as well. So when they come up, you'll see I've got some good stuff here about delivery times. I think one of my favorite ones is this one here. So this tells me things like what my average delivery time is average delivery time by country and that kind of thing. And the beauty is, just as you have ideas to mine the data and present it in different ways, I could just plug these into the demos and make them a bit richer and that kind of thing. You can see on the Teams side, we've got loads of other bits pinging up over here with notifications coming in. So I just find Teams is a really good way to start if you imagine all the data running around behind it in the business, Teams is a good way to start telling users about what's going on. And I think if anyone remembers, I think it wasn't maybe last year, but the year before, it integrate. One of the things, the messages I was trying to get across about integration is we need to start changing integration from being this black box that I think at the time I had this ninja who was the only one who could see in the black box. He was the only one that knows what goes on in BizTalk. But the idea is if we can start letting business people have visibility of what actually happens in the integration that they can't see and don't understand, that's where they really start valuing it a lot more. So these things here could be a really good way of telling your customer, we've received a message, we've got a high value order, that kind of thing. So coming back to the value then, so the value here in this one's better, shipping data is really valuable data. So adding more and more data to that SQL database gives me a lot of data I can mine and make decisions with about the business. I might stop using certain suppliers, start using specific ones that I know are really good. And I think as a small business, I'm pretty sure I probably have a lot more data available to me because of these demos than most small businesses would be. But if what I'm kind of saying is it just scales up, so bigger companies can do the same thing. And there's no reason you can't take the opportunities from the data going through Service Bus to put the data into places where you can mine it and try and work out what's going on and find interesting things about the business that you just didn't know. Next up, we've got customer feedback. So I've got a really good demo that no customer ever actually uses, but it's a good demo anyway. So in my web app for my all right, so if you're a customer and you're happy or not happy in the utilities area, we've got a section where you can give us feedback. And what this does is this pops up a Cognitio Forms form here with a little survey where you can just tell us about the things that we're good and bad and indifferent at. So I could go, have you ordered from us? Yeah. In fact, I should have really got Sam to fill this out this morning, shouldn't I? And so I'll tell you an interesting story actually in a second. So let's say right, so the point to note here, right, just to note is I've ticked good for everything, but I've actually given you quite a bad comment, and we'll submit that anyway. Now, what happens in the demo, is everyone okay if I just keep the slides like that just to make it easier to flip between them? So what happens in the demo is Shopify just embeds Cognitio Forms. There's Logic App connectors for Cognitio Forms, so I can just pull in that survey response. And what I do is I go through sentiment analysis to get a view of what sentiment analysis of the free text that you put in, so I can get a score whether you thought it was good or bad. I can then save it to SQL, save it to the Power App, mine it, etc., etc. And if we go, where's the customer feedback? So up here, so you should see that there's my one that I've just done. Now your sentiment score is between 0 and 1. So 1's very good, 0's very bad. So you can see that sentiment score is quite bad. Now, what's really interesting about that is, I'll tell you a real world story here. So I used to work with a university, and the universities in the UK have something called the Student Survey, which every university runs every year. And basically they score the universities. And what happens is there's like a league table of universities, and the higher up the league you are, the more likely you are to get more students the next year. So it's quite an important thing in that industry. And what happens is a lot of universities run their own internal surveys during the year to see how they're doing, to try and kind of keep themselves on track. And I was working with one university customer, and what we found was we give this survey where it was exactly like my Cognitio Forms multiple choice, and everybody would say, you're a 3 or a 4, you're not bad, you're pretty good, whatever. They get down to the free text and they'd absolutely slaughter you. And when it went into the the business intelligence bit. Everybody's only looking at the numbers. So everyone's going, oh, well, we're getting a 3.5 out of 5. That's pretty reasonable. We're getting 4 out of 5. And they've completely missed all of the valuable data that tells them everything they're doing wrong. So the idea here is if I can get a sentiment score off that text, it gives me a second way of looking at the data. So I can look at what you've picked as multiple choice, but then I could also go, well, let's pick the top 10% and the bottom 10% of sentiment scores and look at the actual feedback we're getting. So if I'm getting like 10,000 surveys, I can't look at them all, but I can work out which ones are the ones that are most likely to give me something interesting to learn about my business. And I think that's a really good use case for plugging in things like cognitive services there. Right, improving product management. So this is the one I did on Monday morning. So the hardest part in this presentation, it's deciding which of the demos to put in. And I like mixing them up every now and again. So this is the first time I've done this one. So I'm walking into the office carrying the unicorn here. It hasn't got a name yet. So I'm carrying this in, and what I'd noticed is the supplier had put the price of that unicorn up over the weekend. And what happens is in Shopify, not all of them, but some of the suppliers, depending on how you connect with them, you get automatic price updates off them. So they just automatically reflect through onto my website. And I was like, actually, that's gone up more than I expected. So I might look at who I get that from and change the supplier or find an alternative if I'm not happy with the price of it or something. And I thought, actually, why don't I know that these have changed price? I mean, it's there. The data's there to tell me. I just haven't got anything that tells me. So that was like, right, that's my new demo. So I sat in the green room on Monday morning and I was mucking around and I basically decided, right, well, I've got product update messages already hit Service Bus. So, there's one tick in the box. So I created a new subscriber. So the Logic app goes and gets the product, compares the price, and it basically gives me a notification of the price change. And then I can obviously decide if I want to do something about it or not. And the other one about product management that I've got that's quite cool as well is this diagram's not the one I've just told you. But the other thing I wanted to do was to make product management really easy. What you'll find with Shopify is if I go into the back end here, it's like every business. You look at the back office systems are always really horrible, and the customer facing systems are always really nice and easy to use. And if I'm looking through products here and I'm like, let's say I've got this Deadpool thing, and you look here and you kind of like, you've got all the data and the info and loads of actions, but it's hard to visualize what that looks like for the customer and like how to take actions on it. So what I found was really cool was when I'm logged into the web, when I'm on the website as an admin, you'll see I've got a little admin button down here. And what I can do is I found, if I go down to the same thing, the Deadpool one here, Shopify is a platform. It's the code behind it's based on Liquid templates, which people may be familiar from the Logic app map and stuff. So what I was able to do is I could go into the code behind the app. So I think it's up here. And I found the product page, which I'll just check I've got the right one yet. Now, I'm able to put something in here that says if you're in admin mode, I can inject some JavaScript now, and I can make a new menu appear, which is this menu down the bottom. This one down here, Unicorn Shop Admin Menu. So that only appears if I'm logged in as an admin. And what it means is that I can actually use the website like a user does. And there's a couple of times I've spotted like typos on the product, so one of the pictures might not be right, or something about that product means I want to do something with it. And to be honest, I wouldn't see it if I was using the back office bit. I'd only really notice it if I was looking at the web app like a customer would be. So I can put some actions down here, and basically all these do is they're just going to call Logic apps straight from the UI. So I can go click there. I'm going to add you to the to-do list. And I just give a reason why I'm putting you to the to-do list, fire away, and that kicks my Logic app off, and he'll appear in my Power app on a list of products that I need to go and do something with. So that's quite cool, but as well I've got things like hot lists. So on the home page, if we jump to the top here, put the right thing in. So I've got my what's hot little things up here. And what I could do is, rather than doing it in the back end where it's not visible, I could go, actually, I quite like this product, add him to the hot list. Again, triggers a logic app, goes and updates that product into the collection, which is the hot list one. Takes a few seconds to run, but that should update once the cache updates on the website, and my new products appeared in the what's hot list. And just as easily I can take them back out, just like that. So, with this model, it's really just a couple of minutes. You can add some features that make your experience for the back office users much richer and easier to use. So where are we now? So I've got a shop. I've got loads of demos in it. I've got some really good use of Azure. I've now got a platform that looks a bit like this. So I've got my original e-commerce platform on the left, and I've complemented it on the right with an enterprise application integration platform where I've used SQL Azure, Power BI, cognitive services, service bus functions. I think I haven't got API management on here, which I need to add. There's other demos as well that I haven't shown you guys today. So I've got things like there's a help bot in the website, a few other things. And I think the key ones though are, I'm using the integration tools that everybody here will be familiar with. The Teams bit is a really great way of starting to interact with your users and collaborate with them. So, we're using that in my enterprise customer, and it's a great way to start that conversation. And it's so easy to do as well, is probably the beauty of it. And then the system of engagement, I think Power Apps are a really great choice to kind of let you do those, plug the holes where you need to build an app, but you want a platform to do it. And actually, the Power App, in my enterprise customer, we really built a Power App as a system of engagement for one of our use cases, where it was actually probably one of the quickest projects we've ever delivered, where we built a Power App and it was into production within about a sprint and a half. And it was just really fine-tuning from there. So it was a really good testament to enterprise delivering in the same way a small business could. So thoughts here then, I've mentioned a few times about the small business and the enterprise bit, so we'll kind of keep away from that one. Implementing back office processes, so we've got the app platform, whether it be Power Apps, Flow, whatever. The data platform and Microsoft's, it's one of their strongest bits. As a small business, I could use SQL and Power BI, but as a bigger business, I might just choose something like data warehouse or something, or data lake. The tools will scale, but you can also make different choices if you need to. Everything in here is really based on compute cost. So OpEx is better for a small business. Some of the larger businesses struggle with OpEx a little bit, I would say, probably as a word of caution, and find CapEx a little bit easier because it's a predictable upfront cost, but OpEx is probably really better for businesses longer term, even though they struggle with it a bit. Serverless as well really powers the idea of fail fast and ditch what doesn't work. So if any of these demos, I did a little bit with them and I found actually it's a really bad idea, I don't need it, you can bin it, and you're not left with servers sat in the corner of the room that nobody's using. You just delete stuff from the portal. And I think the last thing that's probably the most interesting point is, I said earlier on that I thought that the way small business and me as a consultant could change. And actually I've really seen that, especially in the last year, where I've done some projects projects with customers where they're like, just a couple of days here and there. They're projects where I've been given a work package that I can just go and do over a couple of weeks and come back and deliver it. And I think what's interesting is I'm seeing, ones where you might do a managed service as well as to the customer, as well as like delivering the product. But these are like customers that I think there's probably about 4 or 5 customers that I probably never would have been able to work with in the past because I was only doing enterprise type projects. Companies that just physically couldn't afford BizTalk. Now you can do solutions with these guys where the cost of the IT is not the problem anymore, and they just need people who've got the experience, and they can buy like a week of consultancy, and then the running cost of their app might be the cost of a cup of coffee a week or something like that. So that's a new engagement model, and I think a lot of you guys will probably see that more coming up in your consultancies where you're working on shorter term engagements with customers, doing quick win projects and then moving around a lot more. So lastly, just to wrap up, if anyone has any questions, and I think we're finishing just about on time, please feel free to ask any questions. I'll probably be around the serverless booth if anyone wants to ask a question later on. But thank you for listening otherwise, and all the best.
Covey.co